Nobody saw it coming. The religious leaders and Jewish authorities could agree on nothing, but that day, they had agreed that this man named Jesus, something had to happen to him. The trials had started the night before. They had finally convicted him. They had beat him. They had mocked him. They had paraded him up the hill with the beams on his back, and now he is up there for everybody to see. There was a crowd gathered at the cross. We know that there were soldiers that were at the cross that day. We know that there were probably some other religious leaders that were at the cross that day as spectators to basically give themselves an attaboy for getting rid of this movement. Nobody ever dreamed he was who he said he was, right? I mean, that couldn't be the Son of God they were killing up there. And the religious leaders were very proud of the fact that they had brought it to this moment. There were some other people there that day. There were some ladies we'll read about here in a second, but there was one in particular that was there, and it was his mom. I bet as she stood there at the cross that day, her mind went back to those wise men that showed up. Those wise men that brought three really interesting gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Jesus was around 2 or 3 at this time when these guys who had made their way from the east showed up, and these were odd gifts. And one of the reasons they were such odd gifts is myrrh is an embalming fluid. It's an odd gift to give a child. But Mary probably knew at that moment he really was different, and he was born to die. The day's getting dark. The hour's getting near. And John captures his third statement that he said. Remember, he had already told the crowd that he forgave them because they didn't know what they were doing. He had also told the thief on one side that today he would be with him in paradise. And then he turns his conversation, chapter 19, verse 25. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus, what's the next word? Oh, help me out. We can do that better than that. When Jesus did what? He locked eyes with his mom. This isn't a passing glance. You ever seen one of those scenes in a movie where two eyes lock with each other, two people's eyes will lock with each other? That's what happened. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple, the writer of this gospel, standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Now, he wasn't saying, behold himself. He was saying that he was in an act that we're going to explain here in a second. He was giving her care to his best friend John. Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. Can you imagine being Mary that day? See, to just read the story of Mary and not to put yourself in the story, you're not doing the story justice. She is his mother. She is his earthly mother. She is there through thick and thin for Jesus' life. Don't you think there was a lot of other places she would have rather been that day? That day, love did something you and I need to get. Number one, when love shows up, love always offers personal sacrifice. Personal sacrifice. Mary was not perfect. Mary was not sinless. Mary was not able to save herself. That day, love showed up and made a personal sacrifice for his mom, the cross of Jesus. Jesus could have told you all day long, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. But if you take the cross out of that story, this day and that statement that Jesus made in John 3:16 has no significance. Love showed up that day through sacrifice. It's one thing to hear someone say it. It's another thing to watch someone do it. Point number 2, ready? There was emotional support. Love always requires emotional support. Jesus was dying for his mother. And his mother was there for Jesus. Now I want you to think about the last 24 hours of Jesus' life. One of the 12 had left him. Does anybody remember his name? Judas. How many of you have a friend named Judas? All right? If you do, I'm sorry. But they're not many, all right? They're not many named Judas. Because Judas has gotten that rap, right? I don't think Judas was a bad guy, but Judas had betrayed him. One of the disciples he was going to depend on, Simon Peter, did not even know who he was. And the Bible says that they had locked eyes with each other. He's been whipped. He's been beaten. On that cross, when everybody look up here, on that cross that day, he was still 100% man and 100% God. And there was a part of Jesus that needed his mom there, and she was there. Point number 3, ready? There was focused attention. There was focused attention. Could Jesus have saved himself that day, yes or no? Yes, no doubt about it. He could have taken himself off that cross and redeemed the moment. He was still 100% God. He just chose not to. He chose to bear the full weight of your sin and my sin and his mom's sin and Simon Peter's sin that day. But in the middle of it, he saw his mom. And point number 4, ready? In the end, he offered practical help. This is crazy to me. He was securing her heavenly home, which ultimately is the most important payment ever rendered. But yet in the middle of it, get this is crazy. He cared for her care here on earth. Mike, I don't want to bother God with my needs here. He cares.